Hi, my name is Jane. I am a data visualization designer, and this is a quick update on your grandmother's recipe project I've been working on since last year. It is a data documentary project where I'm trying to capture food and how we eat through data. And so recently I've been working on how to visualize a recipe, and that's been a huge challenge. So I'm just going to go through some of the iterations I've done. Let's start with this. So there's a lot of changes. I'm going to go through them really quickly. The really important concept with, I would say, I'm going to speak to my experience, which is Chinese food, is the idea of a circle. The idea of circle is in the sense of, if you look at a lot of the way we eat, traditionally, a lot of times in the past, they would use round tables to eat in the way to allow access to all the dishes. Everyone can access it quite easily. And so this idea of a circle and the idea of bringing people together, this idea of unity, harmony, I think is a really important concept. So I really wanted to use a circle as a way to represent food and recipes. So I was thinking, how do I capture food? So for example, one dish, right? Usually it's served in circular plates. If you look at traditional dishware, it's usually circular, or bowls or plates in a circle as well. So I thought for every recipe, maybe I could have it represented in this way. So each of these, I guess, unit is one recipe. And I was exploring what to show. So I thought the most important thing to show would be to preview flavors, because I think if you think about a menu, you just see a name. If you've never eaten it before, you don't understand what to expect, right? And I think I want to create visualizations that act as like a preview, like a trailer, like a movie trailer. It gives you an idea of what you're in for. So I thought maybe I could show flavor profiles. Scientifically, there are 5 agreed upon flavors. So salty, savory, which is commonly also, represents umami. And then we have sour, bitter, sweet. I think that's 5, yes. So I thought, okay, so one of these circles represents one dish. And then we have around it, we could show all the flavors associated with it. And then within the circle, we could show the kind of ingredients it has. So how many core ingredients define this thing? I'm not talking about things like condiments, right? Like salt or pepper. I'm talking about things like, if it's a meat dish, it has to have, chicken. It has to have lettuce, for example. And so each one of this represents one recipe. And I was playing around with the colors here. Bad idea. I should never delve into color first, because color is too complicated to tackle once a visualization gets out of hand. And so I was playing around with shapes, and I kind of came to this idea I really liked. And so I had one of these represent each flavor. So this is salty, sour, savory, bitter, and sweet. And then playing again with color. I really like how the color plays out, but leave it for the end because of accessibility issues, and make sure double encoding happens as well. Okay, so I was pretty happy with this. And then I realized a fatal mistake, which is I forgot to include texture. I thought texture is super important when it comes to food, and I overlooked it, stupidly. Like something that's crunchy, something that's soft, something that's chewy, something that's tender. Like those are really important aspects that define how we enjoy food, I think. And so this textures are really hard to define. There isn't a boundary or list of ways to understand it. So I have this here I found. This is from a paper, and it's a highly referenced table. It's research from 1960s. But it took a while to find. One of the hardest things about doing research for these projects is trying to understand where to look for them, because I have no domain knowledge or expertise on it. But the way they broke it down in terms of texture, how to categorize textures of food, is through this way. So they have primary, secondary characteristics. There's mechanical characteristics, so how hard is it, how cohesive is it, and they have geometric characteristics as well. So I thought this was really interesting. So this was a really good start for me once I had this idea of how to understand textures and how to call it, how to categorize it. So that's something I had to add to this. So I'm going to move on to another section here. Yeah. So I restructured the circle around. So I made some space on the bottom to put textures. And these are the textures I decided on. I thought this was very encompassing. It's also easy to understand in lay terms. Like there was one that I didn't understand at all. It was what was it? Grittier or grainy and fibrous and cellular, plastic or elastic. I'm just like, I don't use those terms to define food. I use crunchy or tender or soft, but that's about it. So I try to use terms that are more encompassing and more used commonly used, and people in general understand it. And so I did a test of a couple of recipes. I think I did 5 here, and I thought, okay, this is how it could look like. So here we have the flavors, textures on the bottom, and then we have the core ingredients here. So for this one, you need 2 vegetables. I know this is a tomato, but it's 2 vegetables and 1 egg, for example. I actually drew these with a tablet, which I bought recently. It's a Huion. Probably saying that wrong. I got it for like $50. But I had to draw it because I actually trace these over images I pull off of Google. And so I had an egg here, and I tried to draw it as like a vector through through Pathfinder, right? And it looked too perfect. I didn't like how it didn't have a handmade look. But if you look at this egg, I actually use I use a tablet to draw it. It looks more like hand drawn. There's imperfection to it that I really, really enjoyed. So I drew all of these images by hand. And I also don't know how to use it very well. So I was practicing a lot. Yeah, so I draw on top of it, on top of these images. Yeah, my artboard's pretty messy. Anyways, and so I continued to play around with it in terms of how to display everything, because there's a lot of information. And in terms of textures, I try to have it so that they were opposite facing. So if you're either soft or firm, you're chewy or tender, you're thin or viscous, you're crunchy or mushy. I didn't want things to be standalone, like soft, crumbly, viscous, right? I think there should be some sort of opposition or spectrum to some extent to make it easier to understand. And of course, you could be soft and firm. It could be both, but I think it's just easier to understand this information in this way. A challenge I had, because there's so many icons, there's so many things, right? I was like, should I visualize this or should I leave it as text? If we leave it as text, the space it takes up is not consistent based on the word you use, and it looked really bad in terms of distribution of space. I didn't like that. So I really had to think hard about that. There's a lot of categories and it's ridiculous. So in addition to the type of ingredient, so there's a couple of key core ingredients I have. So I have fungus or mushroom, meat, vegetables, egg, seafood. That's a core ingredient, and then there's all the state of the core ingredient. So it could be something that's been frozen and canned, so preserved. And I was trying to draw leaves here, or fresh. So it could be in 3 states. It could be fresh, preserved, or frozen states. For each ingredient. Let's go on to the next section. Okay. So here, I tried to test out a couple of things. I was testing out the replacements of the textures. It just looked bad. It didn't work. I didn't like it at all. And I was still deciding if I should use icons or not for this. And it took a long time to figure it out. And I was like, oh, should I just use like a short form of the text? Like the periodic table? It's so confusing. I didn't like how that looked. Oh, by the way, I was trying to test this out in like a page spread. So it's a letter size book spread. I think I have everything unhidden. Yeah. And then I tried to be a little more crazy and said, oh, okay, why not have the text behind the icon and have both? Stupid idea. I was pretty desperate. Oh, there's a lot of things here. Oh yeah, I was drawing a lot of icons. Let's get rid of this. Okay, so yeah, this is how it looks like. So I had the textures at the bottom, and I actually have an image icon for each one. And I had to redraw these. So the idea was to make this feel different from this. Initially, salty was a couple of dots, but I decided to make them all line based. So there's a shared distinct feeling style to them, which is they're line based. They're just a bunch of lines drawn together. They're not shapes. enclosed shape, they're lines. It's weird to explain it. For texture, to make them all look the same and not confuse it with flavors, they're all within a box. So describe a box. So I thought, okay, if we could describe everything through a box by manipulating how it looks and how it feels, that's how we describe texture. For flavors, it would just be elongated line that's been wrapped around like Play-Doh. If it's a core ingredient, it looks like it's hand drawn. So these are illustrations, right? And if it's a state of these ingredients, they're solid filled and they go behind these core ingredients. So for this one, I can probably tell you what it means. So a sweet potato leaves, we have it as stir fry, and it can be sweet, savory, or salty. It involves two vegetables. They're two vegetable ingredients, so sweet potato leaves and garlic. In terms of texture, it can be, so this is soft or firm, because it can be soft because of the leaves. It can be firm because of the stems, and it's quite I think this is crunchier. No, this is mushy. So it can be quite mushy. Yeah, the taste is a bit mushy. The leaves are quite mushy when it's cooked. It's very soft. So that's how I thought I could define it. Oh, and the core ingredients are fresh. So if it looks like a flower, it's fresh. If it looks like a can or rectangle, it's preserved. Hexagon is frozen. And I don't add color yet because color is another layer to consider, and I don't consider that until the end. It's just how I approach it. Everyone does it differently, but I personally don't like to use color right away. And I made some adjustments to this one because I thought the background here looked too similar to this. So I made them more black and white, I think, just like an outline. Here, this one's more close, more the latest iteration. So they're just outlines, boxes. And I made this more pronounced. And I have two more categories I actually forgot: legumes and grain-based core ingredients. Yeah, so I restructured how this looks like. So this is the most recent one. So let's go through the textures. So we have soft, firm, chewy, or tender. I did chewy like this because chewy means it doesn't come off. So this is more specific to meat. So this applies to across everything, but this applies more to meat. So if it's chewy, it sticks onto the bone better. If it's tender, it falls off really quickly. Mushy, kind of explanatory, right? How it looks like it's, I think of like, I don't know, something you can squeeze. Crunchy, it's kind of sharp. It's hard. You have to chew. You know, there's a sound. This applies more to soups, or if there's a lot of liquid that comes with the dish. So it could be thin or it could be viscous. Viscous is really, really thick. I might call it thick, because viscous might not be the right term. Let's see. Thick. I don't know. I'll think about that. I have to think about the word a bit more. And so this is the latest version of what I've got. I'm trying to save it. Bad idea. Because there's a lot of images in here. It takes a long to save. But this is the latest version. And I'm thinking... So initially I had like 50 recipes I wanted to show, but it's just so hard to populate all of this through 50 recipes. And I think I decided to downsize to like 30. So I have, the way I've organized this page, there's a lot of work to do still. The way I've organized this page was, I said, there'll be a section where it just shows things you can make in under 30 minutes. And I think time is the most important factor you consider when you're cooking something. Do you have the time to make it? If you don't, you can make something for the meal you're about to have with under 30 minutes, right? These are things you can make really quickly if you have the ingredients on hand. If you're cooking in bulk, it takes a couple hours, right? These, like, you know, a lot of Chinese food, a lot of soups, it takes a long time to cook. So you can cook it in big batches and you just cook it for several hours, but you have enough for the week. And we have a couple of things I call miscellaneous. I need a better term for it, but the idea is these are things that you have as a side dish or as a snack. They're not considered a meal, but they can be a snack, or they can be a meal. They can be part of like a side dish. And some of them, my mom makes them from scratch. Like, she'll dry cabbages out, and then when she cooks them, it's so crunchy and sweet. It has an amazing flavor. So these are very they're not considered meals. They're kind of like a side. And I initially imagined this as a book, like a recipe book, where you have, I'll have like the actual instructions for the recipe, page by page, like a recipe book. But I wanted to add like a table of contents overview of all the recipes, which is what this sort of is. The challenge with this is in the future, if I want to add more recipes to this, it's really hard to update this, right? So if, say for instance, if I had to reorganize information, it's not really easy. So I'm currently thinking of maybe making each one of these a card and then instead of a book, maybe have like a set of cards, like recipe cards. So there's I picked this up, I guess it's not like a garage sale, but there was like a neighborhood and they had their things for spring cleaning, people just putting things out that people can just take for free. And there's this pocket chef I got, and essentially each card is a recipe, the front and back. So the front shows the ingredients, and the back would show the steps to cook it. And I thought maybe I can do something like this with data visualization somehow. So I think I might abandon the book, not completely, but to some extent, where this is more flexible to deal with. And that's something I'm going to explore this week and next week as well. And we'll see. So this is what I've got so far. Thanks so much for tuning, and I'll see you next time.